Right, so before we make our way to Goron City, I was almost going to call it Goron Village, of course you'll see why when we get there, there is some things we can do along the way, and of course we'll go ahead and proceed to. But first, we'll go ahead and make the potion, like I said before. 2 fireproof lizards and a lionel horn will simply do. I haven't, bothered showing it, and for reasons I'll explain in a bit. But I have been doing a couple of other things, like, I did a second round, I believe I mentioned, of gathering Farosh horn shards for more money, since we will need it for, among other things, unlocking the 4th Great Fairy, and for just general need and use, because the Ancient Arrow transaction does cost a pretty penny itself. And of course we're going to be doing that a lot, so among other things, we'll just go ahead and finish up before we leave Akala to obviously get its tower, to come back and doing it later. But I have been doing other things, like refighting a few, not a lot, not strenuously, or I might have showed like a marathon of sped up of fighting the area bosses, or the field bosses, sorry. You need to do that anyway, because in order for them to produce greater loot, you do need to, it's how the game calculates the elevation of enemy levels. You do want to, go through a few rounds with them in order to get them to their highest grade. Color, I should say, because I had mentioned before, and in case anybody hasn't caught on, the level of the grade of enemies depends on color, which is totally fine. I think it's a good idea. In fact, Nintendo has done it a lot too. It goes in regular mode, red, which is the mode we're in. It goes red, blue, black, silver, and it will stay at silver. Now, you could do in master mode, which offers some replayability. I'll give my opinions on that in a couple episodes. In master mode, along with a few other changes, red enemies disappear. There are no red enemies. So the lowest grade is replaced with another higher grade, which is of course gold, following silver. So yeah, in order to get these higher graded enemies, the game weighs a few things. I know this is a little bit of a debate on the exact specifics on how that works. I don't have it in front of me, but the general rule of thumb is this, and it seems to be very true. The level of enemies to be encountered, as well as the kind of loot they can drop, depends on how far you've progressed yourself. In other words, the game measures this by how many of that particular enemy you've defeated, as well as how many spirit orbs you have. And for all intents and purposes, defeating a divine beast counts as clearing 4 whole shrines, which makes sense because you get a whole heart container. So as we head over into Death Mountain territory, you see right there we can make use of the fireproof potion, and of course that does unfortunately take away my speed up, because you can only have one mod active at a time via food effects, not your clothes, not your equipment, not your gear. Which is why this a lot of people like to use the Barbarian armor, which, to be fair, is a completely valid and useful option to have, since you always have pretty much 3 mighty bananas on always. I of course lean on the latter, having more higher defense provided solely by the Champion's Tunic alone, which is also incredibly helpful, since the Champion's Tunic uniquely allows you to see enemy health bars, and it lets you weigh out weapon usage and whatnot. So as we finally make our way here, we go ahead and see the cutscene for Vah Rudania. No matter what, I always find myself, even before I finalize this route that I finally wanted to take with Breath of the Wild 1, in lieu of the sequel hopefully coming out soon, or relatively soon, is that I always do Vah Rudania last. I'm not 100% certain why. It was just that the other ones just offer up much better, well, take your pick. But with Vah Meadow, you get access to 2 great things. You get Revali's Gale, and you get access to the champion's gold eagle bow, which of course is a 3-shot bow that can be restored really easily. It's just great. Mipha's Grace is a fantastic plan B to have. It's a fairy that gives you shields. And Vah Naboris gives you Urbosa's Fury, which is an end to all fights, pretty much. That shock that it provides does a ton of damage and paralyzes a bunch of enemies enough to where you can just clean through them. You just do the 3 hard Master Sword glitch, you're set. The fights are over pretty much. So Yeah, and Varudanya, now, I wanted, initially, in my blind playthrough, I wanted to go see the Gorons first. But then, of course, other complications happened that I mentioned prior in other episodes. And, yeah, it turned out the way it did. And effectively, yeah, with Varudanya, you get Daruk's Protection, which, funny enough, it seems like a really good idea. It's another great defensive move, but here's the problem. In this game, you can occasionally want to parry with your shield. Well, Daruk's Protection is always active while you have your shield out. It will always project over you, kind of like we saw there in the cutscene with Yunobo, the Varudanya's descendant, who inherited the power that we are going to inherit after we get this Divine Beast. But it sort of gives you... It's a hitbox interaction. It's really troubled. Sometimes it'll go off, and not only it won't give you the parry, so, or a block or something like that. It just takes it immediately unless you want to like save it for a move that you really can't block. So what happens more often than not is, even in speedruns, something I didn't realize until I checked this out, you can actually go into your menus and you can disable any of the champion abilities. You can just pick one, and of course you can cancel it out. So they end up doing that because of that bad interaction, which is really unfortunate. Character-wise, I found Daruk to be the most fun and awesome looking of the champions, one of the first ones I wanted to meet, and then of course we know how that went with the story and all that. So yeah, anyway, you only need 4 minutes about the fireproof potion, because you just make a beeline straight to the city, in quotes. And that's also why I took the detour to go ahead and in the last part and farmed up some more shards, is to get plenty of money, because armor from shops is rather pricey, particularly the helmets and the chest. The leggings tend to be the least expensive of that. Reason being, because in certain areas you get passive, as an armor bonus, you get passive heat resistance, so you don't need the fireproof potion from wearing one article of armor, which is why I brought the legs. But in deeper places, like where you had to unlock the quest to get to Varudanya, which is get Yunobo, you go deeper into the mines, you need 2 articles of clothing. It gets even harder. And the same is true for when you finally go up to this section right here, where you have to, get Varudanya and activate him. This is one of the more creative ones. I know Nintendo is very much well known for this, for good reason. I almost wish in this particular instance they picked a theme and sort of stuck with it, or maybe just stood out to make things more unique. I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss with this, because I like half of these pre-Divine Beast missions, and I dislike the other half. Or rather, that's the wrong word. It's not that I dislike them, it's just I feel that they're very much wanting in more. This is very unique because, unlike most of the other ones, we're not actually so much fighting alongside a companion of the race in question, and it's sort of a mix of stealth. I don't know, it gets very picky, if I'm being really honest. I don't particularly like doing it over and over again, but I think it was a great, instance at like first. You can, obviously you have to figure out how to get around these things. You can play it the stealth way, or you can be more aggressive, which turns out being just a lot quicker and a lot less tedious, to be frank, and just go ahead and deal with these drones rather than have a sort of stop and go red light green light with Yunobo here. Although I will admit, and people who know me well will realize this, I'm actually pretty good with names. I didn't remember his name until I brought the text box up again, and that's really a shame, because like I said before, Sidon and Riju made a better impression. I don't even remember his name. Whoever it was who helped us with the Rito and Yunobo here, they're very forgetful. It's unfortunate, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't really get much interaction with them, other than just like, it's just, for an instance, I know you can always say this again, typically with Nintendo, with other games, they'll say, I'll go with AAA titles, it was just to out of sheer laziness and just like to rush something out. With Nintendo, they are true artisans. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt in this regard. It was more than likely time constraints. They just wanted to get the bare bones. They had a goal in mind. They wanted to make a big open world, and they wanted to focus really hard and get that part right, that, you know, that time and effort had to come from other sources. And I know that bothered a lot of other people. And so I'll reiterate again, this is something that, you know what, it's unfortunate, but we'll deal with it for now. I do have to point it out because it is very true, but hopefully in the sequel, which, you know, is everybody's, you know, very much hyped for, in anticipation, myself included, I have full plans on. Oh yeah, I'll mention this right now. Bad interaction and momentum is what made me slip on the corner there, and I ended up, of course, dropping into that spotlight. But yeah, these are things that, you know, for all of my criticisms, please understand, I still think this is a great game. In fact, I'll bring it up right now. I'll bring it more in depth or next part. But as far as the DLC content is concerned, I've played this game fully 10 times, including for this playthrough. I've done the DLC content 3, and I've come to some, you know, obviously since I'm making the recording now and chronicling my thoughts on it and everything, along with showing some more new interesting stuff, you know, want to have my say in this regard. So for all my criticisms, I do really like this game. I don't regret it at all. But yeah, it would be, you know, it wouldn't be fair to not mention these things. Something you like really much, you can be also very critical of it as well. And that just goes to show how much you actually care about it, and that'll be a whole other conversation and subject for another time. But as we go into the Divine Beast here, so yeah, I have the least practice with him, with this Divine Beast. We've already done yet. I kind of like where they first start off with this, sort of, you know, just shake it up a bit. It's like, okay, this one's gimmick is that, you know, you have to control the light source or something like that. It's only for this first part. And again, it's more like, you know, the dungeons were just, you know, like the characters in the lead up, which is really what I'm trying to say through this whole thing. It was really just to serve a purpose, to serve its purpose, to get the minimum viable product out with, you know, with the goal of meeting their objective in nailing this, you know, introducing Zelda into a free and open exploratory world, which they absolutely nailed. But something that you will see, and which is what I've been saying, is that it's missing some of the key Zelda parts. If this game had, let's just say hypothetically, had spliced like dungeons, like for instances of these, even if it was just 4, you don't have to change the number even though some other Zelda games have more or less in the number in terms of dungeons. Even if you just had 4 of tried and true Zelda design dungeons, this would easily have been my favorite Zelda game, hands down, even with a couple of the other for instances of shortcomings I've noted in the story and all their stuff. Yeah, even if they had the open world, which they nailed, but they had better dungeons, like we're talking about here with the Divine Beasts, this could easily have been, probably would have be my favorite Zelda game, hands down. Which of course brings me around back to what I want to say right before we get into the Phantom Ganon fight here. Is that what I wanted to do, my goal that I brought in with doing this playthrough was, again, to do something that I enjoy, to also comment about it, which is what I've been doing over these speed up sections. It's also why I've been speeding it up, is that a lot of the travel, a lot of the, you know, A to B sort of stuff, something more akin to like a Pokemon game also, is just something that, you know, can easily be talked over. I want to take advantage of those moments to go ahead and, you know, convey my input, which would give you a fair reason to, you know, watch yet again another playthrough of a game, because there's obviously many videos on this game and playthroughs alike without, you know, mine being included. So naturally, for my instance, I wanted to include something a little bit more unique for the most part. I think those glitches might have provided a more solid experience in that regard. But of course, as we wrap up here, because that's what we're doing here, this being the 4th and final Divine Beast, is I wanted to start to sort of bring on a conclusion in my commentary about the game. I suppose before we go into the fight in full, I'll just mention this right now. Originally, as some of you will remember from my first part, I was going to go over the DLC, albeit as time went on. This actually has been a 2-month project by now, as of my commentary recording right here. I had intended to, if I had to, again, speed up over some of the more well, it's pretty much gonna be most of it, the content of the DLC, and then just give my regards on it. And then I realized more recently that that could fit one whole video. But if I were to cover the content, and you know, even if I were to put, say, of the mini trials like 2 in 1, there's like 4, and then there's the last one which comes with the DLC, that's like 2 or 3 other parts, and it's 2 or 3 other parts that don't really have anything unique or in content. So I realized that, bottom line, I don't really even need to show much of the DLC content, if at all. So what's going to happen next part is I'm going to be discussing the DLC as a whole, but I won't actually be doing or showing all of it, if that makes sense. Simply because there's nothing I could show you, apart from what I could say, which I said before will fit in a single video, that you couldn't see or do anywhere else, you know, yourself. That includes the cutscenes, which of course I'll be talking about a bit as well. The Fireblight Ganon fight here is especially one of the easier ones. I forget the timing on this, but it really feels like you can two-phase him easily with the status lock. And if you're wondering why I'm not using bomb arrows like I did on the other Phantom Blights, that's why. You can't use bomb arrows in this high heat, which makes sense. But just like that, he's done, it's over with, and that's all the Divine Beasts. And I gotta say, they're not bad, but they're definitely not the gold standard that we would expect from a Zelda game. These are definitely the weakest content in terms of dungeon-esque experiences in all of the Zelda titles, and that's including some of the 2D ones. Yeah, but like I said, you know, fair is fair. They had a huge time constraint, they had a big goal in mind, they met that goal, which has a lot to do with this as well. But these were serviceable, they really were. And so, like I said, first iteration, be fair again. Okay, so now that you have this groundwork, let's see a Majora's Mask, if you will. Because a lot of people were wondering how Majora's Mask was going to turn out. You know, Ocarina of Time set a huge gold standard, a new change from 2D to 3D in Zelda, so it was a lot of hype and anticipation and wonder whether or not they're going to stick the landing. So here's really hoping and praying that they'll be able to pull off, a Majora's Mask again, and that the sequel will actually have great open world exploration along with that good old Zelda stuff that we're talking about. More intrinsic side quests with these characters, which to be fair, are very well done in portrayal, but not done well in service or follow through. You know, they've got the uniqueness of character just by looking at them. I can tell the course that they were trying to lean with a lot of them, but we don't really, you know, interact with them, and that's kind of the point of using a medium as a video game. But I digress. That'll be the end of this video, and essentially the end of the primary portion of preparation for playing Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I'll be finishing my comments and concluding that, or my thoughts and concluding that next part, which we come in here, the Shrine of Resurrection. After you get all of the Divine Beasts, you will of course get the message that you can do the Champion's Ballad, which is of course one of the two main parts of the DLC, the other part being the Trial of the Sword, which I gave my thoughts on that. So thank you guys very much for sticking it out. I hope to see you guys then, and as we finish up with this DLC cutscene, we'll go ahead and pick it up from here, and I'll discuss the DLC in its entirety, and then we'll make way for the conclusion of this playthrough. Thank you very much, guys.